We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, we are back with yet another episode of the Polyticks Show. I'm your host, Dustin Road Grimes, and how you doing out there? A lot of news this week that we're going to cover today. And as usual, we are going to go deep into the weeds. Deep into the weeds. That's what I like to do. You know that. Ton of stuff that is just, you know, there's some headlines that are so big that you can't really ignore them. And, you know, I try to cover stuff that the indie media at large maybe isn't focusing a ton on. I mean, there's going to be some overlap, obviously. But at the very least, even if you know the nature of the stories we're covering today, maybe I've got some new insight or some new information to provide you with. And there's this continuing kind of, what's the word I should use? Conglomeration or kind of maybe crossing of the lines or crossing of the polarities when it comes to conservatives and liberals, realizing that we have a lot of the same basic complaints about government and about the country at large, and what's going on, and that we're fighting these stupid little, you know, petty battles over absolutely meaningless garbage, you know, like who can use what bathroom or whether or not we should impose religious beliefs on women who want to abort a pregnancy, or whether we should impose, you know, a medical regime on people who might not want a certain medical procedure. You know the deal. So we're going to start today with arguably the biggest story of the week, which was Donald Trump being convicted in a court of law as a felon for misreporting hush money that he paid to Stormy Daniels. Now, I'll start by saying this. The people that are the most joyous and you know, overjoyed that Trump was prosecuted for this crime, you know, quote unquote crime. I don't even really know that it's necessarily a crime. Are the same people who supported Bill Clinton in the 90s. And I always thought that liberals specifically were past the point where a politician's sex life really matters unless they're doing something that's actually illegal, you know, like young kids, pedophilia, that kind of stuff. Prostitutes even maybe is a bridge too far, but I don't even know if that's necessarily, I mean, it's a crime, so whatever. You could say it's a crime. It's a stupid crime because that's a profession that's been around since the dawn of time and is obviously not going anywhere. But that's a whole other side trail that we don't need to take right now. Let me start by showing you the kind of, I wanted to show you the local reporting on this, just so we can kind of see what people are saying at a local level. So this is from an Idaho news station.
As a convicted felon on July 11th. But, major point, he is still legally allowed to continue his campaign for president.
So the station, I believe, is hold on a second. Let me find that. It's KTVB, and it's based in Idaho. And yeah, just listen. They have this guy from Boise State, basically, who's supposedly a political expert, and let's just break it down.
This afternoon, we're joined virtually by Boise State political science professor Dr. Charlie Hunt to talk about the verdict and the impact it'll have on the 2024 election.
Now, right off the bat, I feel bad for this guy because his name is Charlie Hunt. So if you were to initialize his name, it would be C. Hunt, which kind of sounds like Chunt, or if you make the H silent, another word, I won't
Dr.
say.
Hunt, this is clearly a historic decision. He is now the first former president to be a convicted felon.
So, completely irrelevant, but I went to high school with a kid whose name was Mike Hunt, and he changed his name to Terry because people made fun of him because his name was Mike Hunt. So
I'm curious, how do you believe this changes the political landscape, or does it change it?
I'm not sure whether it changes it or not, Joe. It's really too early to say, partly because of how unprecedented this is. We've never had a president convicted of a felony before.
So I think this is interesting because if you notice, the media tone on this is, oh my God, this is unprecedented. We've never had a president convicted of a felony. What does that mean? Does that mean that no presidents have ever committed felonies? Of course not. It just means none have ever been convicted of them before. So whether or not you believe Trump is guilty or whether you like or dislike Trump, that's the reality of this situation. I mean, George W. Bush and Dick Cheney committed multiple crimes that are well documented, and neither of them has ever been convicted or probably ever will be.
I believe Ulysses Grant was the only one convicted of a misdemeanor for driving his carriage too fast. But we know up to this point that anywhere from...
I love that too. The only other president who's been convicted of a felony was driving his carriage too fast. Isn't that quaint and adorable?
10% to a third of Trump voters have said in polls that they would reconsider doing so if he were convicted of a felony.
So for me personally, I'm just going to put this out there. I'm just going to be honest. This conviction, more than anything, would be a factor in me voting for Trump. I think based on this conviction alone, I would consider voting for Trump now. And simply because of how hard they are going to keep him out of there. I mean, to me, that's a red flag, but let's keep going.
And so that would be a huge number if that proves to be true. I'm skeptical that number is that high. At the same time, people already tend to know how they feel about Trump. We had him for 4 years as president. He was a known quantity before that. So I'm skeptical whether or not this is really going to change a lot of people's minds about him. Those who love him, those who don't. And I think we saw that in the reactions from voters that we saw on the street today.
And as soon as the trial began, it was initially divisive, and I think many expected it to be. It came a question, though, of is this going to impact the
That's an understatement, and we're going to go into the details on that in just a minute.
Presidential race? Are we going to see this rally Trump's campaign? I'm curious, do you think this might help the former president?
I think in some ways it already has.
I should have pulled this, but my friend sent me a thing. They raised like $30 million. I think he mentions it, but they raised like $30 million, like almost instantly as soon as the conviction came down.
We saw this afternoon that the Trump campaign reported that in the 24 hours following the verdict, they got $35 million in campaign donations.
Well, 35
It was a single day record. We saw similar kinds of reactions after his mugshot came out in the Georgia case last year. And so, for his diehard supporters, this is just kind of more proof that he's being persecuted, that as one of the
Yeah. I mean, to anyone with any common sense, it's proof that he's being persecuted. Because if this were really equal application of the law, there are so many criminals that have been president that should be prosecuted immediately. So there's that.
voters we saw said he's done nothing wrong. But Donald Trump's problem is that those types of supporters alone are not enough to win him this election. There are a lot of Americans out there who may not love Joe Biden, but are not comfortable voting for Donald Trump yet. And this is just such uncharted territory that it's really tough to say at this point whether that's going to sort of push voters one way or the other.
At least he's somewhat honest, I guess. This is such uncharted territory. That's a good point. I mean, no one really knows. I think it's going to work out in his favor more than anything, because I think most people can see what's going on. And if you can't, you're either intellectually dishonest or just a partisan stooge.
And I think we've started to see an indication of this already today. But my question for you, how do you see the former president handling the verdict as he continues his campaign?
I'm sure with his usual calmness and sobriety that we're used to from him. No, I mean, he's lashed out at the judge. He's lashed out at the prosecutors. called it a disgrace, a con job, etc. All the kinds of usual stuff.
So real quick, I just thought about this, but he lashed out at the judge. This is something that you're not supposed to do. Bernie Sanders, when he was attacked by the Democrats and the establishment powers that be, he could have gone real hard against them, and he did not. So this is another reason that Trump is such a red line for these people, is that he actually fights back. He actually has the platform to say things that people will hear outside of the mainstream media, and that is threatening, of course.
On the other hand, it's, how do you run for president as a convicted felon? This is, like we said, uncharted territory on the legal side, but I think on the political side.
What was he convicted for? That's the thing is, and you'll notice this with the propaganda, they focus solely on the convicted felon part. Convicted felon. They're going to say convicted felon. It's like NLP, where they just keep saying it. It's like hypnotism, really. The press is just like, convicted felon, convicted felon, convicted felon, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion, unprovoked invasion. Everybody now, unprovoked invasion, convicted felon.
This is in a lot of ways typical territory for Trump. This is not the first scandal he has ever faced. He has his playbook for how to do it, right? To sort of go after those who are against him, to sort of talk about the judge as corrupt, to talk about the system as corrupt. This was one of the bases of his initial campaign. So, we'll see how far that gets him in the coming weeks and months.
And we know that the judge in this case has some room in sentencing. We know that there can be a massive fine. There could also be up to 4 years in prison. We'll keep an eye on that. It's hard.
The judge does, in fact, have a huge conflict of interest, which I'm going to go into in a few minutes. But he's not wrong about that. That's the thing. And these people are not used to this. They're not used to someone having the balls and the means to actually slap back.
To guess what will happen. On the other side of the coin, of course, you have the incumbent, current President Joe Biden. We've seen some statements from the White House. Do you think this is something that the Biden campaign will continue to point to, or do you think maybe they'll try to move on and start preparing for things like the debate?
It's tricky territory, right? And it's important to disentangle this message from the Biden campaign with that from the White House, right? This is
sure it is. How naive do you have to be to believe that there's any real separation there? But
something the Trump White House didn't always do so effectively. So you saw from the White House a response along the lines of, we respect the rule of law and we have no further comment.
This is always the framing too. Like, I don't completely dislike this guy, but people like this always pretend that they have like a balanced, like down the middle view, and just listen to how he's talking. Of course, the Trump administration didn't do this well. They were sloppy and stupid and loud, while the Biden team is so classy. They commit war crimes and other fantastic garbage with class.
The Biden campaign has just emphasized the importance of beating Trump in November, doesn't seem too eager to wade in on the legal side. And part of this, I think, is because Trump is trying to tie Joe Biden and the White House to this verdict, that, this idea that this is all just a political hit job, just in time for an election year. We should be clear that this is totally misleading, right? The Department of Justice passed on trying this case as a federal crime. This is New York state law we're talking about. So Joe Biden really not involved here.
Okay, let's stop right there. Now let's go to a real journalist, someone who actually does research and has a actually unbiased view that speaks truth to power. Mr. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald.
Donald Trump currently faces four separate criminal proceedings. One in South Florida brought by the Biden Justice Department through special counsel prosecutor Jack Smith, which is the case that...
So this guy, this particular case, this guy's making the argument, of course, that, it has nothing to do with Biden. It's a New York thing. Glenn just pointed out how there are four cases mysteriously that all popped up this year. This is the part that just is like so mind-blowing to me, that you have to be, again, a cult member or a complete fucking liar to not see this. And Glenn's the one who made this point, but I'm going to make it again. Trump has been a public figure for many years. He's been in the limelight since the 1980s. He had a goddamn corporate television show. And all of these accusations and all these trials and all these cases that are being, run against him, or, the accusations, they're all from years and years ago. Like the E. Jean Carroll thing is a great example. That was past the statute of limitations. They dug this up and made it a thing. Like all this stuff is old cases, just that anything they can dig up. And if these were serious charges, they would have been made in the era when they happened. They wouldn't have waited until the guy was, a couple inches from the presidency to lobby these charges, to basically bring these cases against him.
That charges him with mishandling or pilfering without authorization, top secret, and other classified documents, and he's charged there under the Espionage Act. There are 2 cases that deal with Trump's post-election conduct that claim that he was essentially attempting to subvert democracy, a federal case in Washington, D.C., also with Jack Smith in the Biden Justice Department, and then one in Atlanta with an obviously Democratic Party prosecutor who has her own problems. Those cases, to the extent that you compare them, do assert serious charges if there were convictions. Trump could be convicted, for example, under the Espionage Act of taking classified material on purpose that he wasn't authorized to take and then refusing to give them back, or he could be convicted of subverting democracy and therefore attempting to launch a coup. Those are serious charges to be convicted of. We've gone over many times the weaknesses, the severe weaknesses in those cases, but at least if you were to talk about convictions of that sort, you could see them having a very consequential impact on how many Americans perceive Donald Trump. I don't think that's the case for this criminal proceeding, in part because I think the perception will be that it's about nothing more than Donald Trump's relationship with Stormy Daniels and the attempt to cover that up. And I think in the 1990s, Americans showed when they continued to support Bill Clinton by fairly large amounts and even gave the Democratic Party the victory in 1998 in the midterms at the height of the Monica Lewinsky and Paula Jones scandal, that American voters don't really care that much about what they perceive to be personal or private lives. They don't.
So this is a great point, and it's kind of illustrative of how much the Democratic Party has been infiltrated by the neoconservatives. I mean, you can see it on MSNBC. I've played clips countless times of David Frum becoming the woke liberal, Bush's former, Nicole Wallace, Bush's former fucking press secretary, has a show on MSNBC. Steve Schmidt, the guy who ran the campaign for McCain, is on MSNBC. Joe Scarborough, a former Republican senator, on MSNBC, the liberal channel. So the fact that all of a sudden the party of Bill Clinton is outraged that Donald Trump did some sex stuff years ago is completely, a joke. It's a facade.
Don't care about that with our fellow citizens. They don't really care about it in their leaders. What they really care about most is that the president or people who are elected actually do things to improve their lives. Material improvement of their lives is by far the thing that drives them when they go to the ballot box. We've seen that over and over. But
how has a war in Ukraine and Gaza improved your lives, America?
Because of that, precisely because of that, we know that the American media is going to engage in endless efforts and depicting this in the most melodramatic way to talk about Donald Trump as a serious felon, as somebody who now faces jail time. They'll emphasize over and over in history that that an American president has been convicted in all.
Like the guy on the Idaho News just did, that I just showed you.
Of American history. So let's look at this ABC News graphic of the trial, which will give you a sense of already how dramatic the media is being. Now, it is true that there were 34 felonies, 34 counts, separate counts, and you see here all the red bars showing that the jury found him guilty on all of them. So you look at this and you think, oh my, that's really overwhelming. The jury found him guilty 34 times. In reality, it's all the same crime. It's just that each different time that this entry was made into the bookkeeping of the Trump organization, the prosecutor charged him with either 2 or 3 different crimes, but it's the same crime just reoccurring every month. In reality, he's been convicted of 1 act that the jury found him guilty for, and that is the act of purposely manipulating the internal documents of the Trump organization by hiding what the payments were to Michael Cohen, what they were for, and secondarily, the jury found that they were being hidden for some sort of illegal or corrupt motive. That's what.
Okay, I want to pause right there for a second and just show you this real quick because actually, hold on a second. The charges that are being made against Trump are the same thing that Hillary Clinton would paid a fine to the FEC for doing last year. So let's look at this real quick. Federal campaign watchdog finds DNC and Clinton campaign over dossier spending disclosure. The conciliation agreements found probable cause to believe that both the campaigns and national parties misreport the purpose of certain disbursements, which is what they're accusing Trump of doing with Stormy Daniels. So just a little bit more of this. The Federal Election Committee has agreed, and this is by Zach Montellaro, 3/30/2022. The Federal Election Committee has agreed to a fine of over $100,000 against the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign over an investigation into alleged misreporting of spending related to the now infamous Steele dossier. The FEC fined both organizations after a pair of now years-old complaints from the Campaign Legal Center. Another from the conservative Coolidge-Reagan Foundation alleged that the party and campaign reported payments to the powerhouse Democratic law firm Perkins Coie as legal expenses when in actuality some of the money was earmarked for paying for Fusion GPS through Perkins Coie to conduct opposition research on Donald Trump, as the campaign's legal center's original complaint read. The Steele dossier, which was first made public when BuzzFeed News published it in January 2017. Quick side note, BuzzFeed News I don't think exists anymore. That's one rare instance of accountability in this situation where someone who really got it wrong actually suffered consequences. BuzzFeed went out of business. Contained a variety of accurate, inaccurate, unproven, and sometimes salacious allegations about the ties between Russia and Donald Trump, as well as others in his orbit. That's an understatement. The conciliation agreements found probable cause to believe that both the campaign and National Party misreported the purpose of certain disbursements when they said that payments to Perkins Coie were for legal fees. The pair of agreements were signed for the Democratic groups on February 16th by Graham Wilson, an attorney who was formerly at Perkins Coie and is now at the Elias Law Group. In the agreements, the DNC and Clinton campaign contend that they believed they properly disclosed the spending, just like Trump did. The agreements read that the party and campaign do not concede, but will not further contest the commission's finding. So, again, how can you have any faith in a legal system that makes a huge deal out of this crime for Donald Trump in an election season and not a huge crime out of it for the DNC and Hillary Clinton after they lost the campaign? Oh, they get a slap on the wrist and the fine. This guy gets a whole media campaign, of organized. He's a felon. He's a felon. I mean, I don't think he's going to go to jail. He's probably going to appeal it. We'll see what happens. I'm not. And the thing is, just by defending this kind of thing, people will go, "Oh, you're for Trump." At this point, probably that's not even it. But this is the thing that pushed me to the edge here, right? Because again, how can you have any faith in a legal system that does this? And at the very least, imagine if Bernie Sanders had gotten to this point, right? At the very least, Trump has the kind of gusto and the financial resources to do battle. Someone like Bernie Sanders folds in half. And anyway, let's
really found. Now, Trump obviously has the right to appeal, but I think there's very little chance, and I've worked I worked in the Manhattan legal system for 13 years. I know how these courts function, how they work. I can't imagine an appellate court, let alone the Supreme Court in New York, assessing this trial and issuing decisions about whether the jury verdict and the conviction should be overruled before the 2024 election. We're just already a few months away from that. So it seems very likely that Trump will head into the 2024 election as a convicted felon. The other question, though, that really looms large here is whether Trump will receive any prison time from Judge Merchan, who has presided over this trial in a very transparently politicized way. And we talked about this last night, that Manhattan is one of the most anti-Trump, pro-Democratic Party enclaves that you can find anywhere in the country. I lived in Manhattan and worked in Manhattan for almost 15 years, went to law school there for another 3, and finding a Republican in Manhattan is almost as difficult as finding a Democrat in, say, Alabama. But it's even worse because it's just a small enclave, and the difference in Manhattan is something like 85 to 15 when they vote in federal elections. And so you're talking about a place that had a jury pool overwhelmingly of Trump haters and Democratic Party supporters. That's one of the weaknesses politically of this case. Now, I want to show you Trump's reaction to...
Okay, now before we go on, he said something about Judge Merchan. I want to share this again, and I shared this when I covered the AOC Marjorie Taylor Greene spat, because this is how it started. But this is incredibly relevant, and I went a little deeper this time. This is the daughter of the judge who just convicted Trump. And I want to show you how connected to the Democratic Party she is, because this doesn't even really give the full picture on that. And I was actually able to dig up a little bit more information. So this says Dem clients of daughter of NY judge in Trump hush money trial raised $93 million off the case. So this is just talking about the money that her clients made off this case. This is the daughter of the judge, by the way, who refused to recuse himself. All they asked was for a different judge in the case, and this guy would not recuse himself. But let's keep going. So here, 2 major Democratic clients of the judge overseeing Donald Trump's hush money trial have raised at least $93 million in campaign donations and used the case as their solicitation emails, raising renewed concerns that the jurist has a major conflict of interest. Trump's attorneys are considering filing another motion demanding Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan recuse himself from the trial set to begin April 15th. We all know how that went, sources said. The judge's daughter, Lauren Merchan, is president of Authentic Campaigns, a Chicago-based progressive political consulting firm whose top clients include Representative Adam Schiff, who is the lead prosecutor in Trump's first impeachment trial, and the Senate Majority PAC, a major party fundraiser. Authentic Campaigns, and thus the judge's daughter, is actively making money from this sham attack against President Trump, rendering Judge Merchan conflicted out, Trump spokesman Stephen Chung told the Post. No lies. Adding that evidence of bias is even clearer now than it was in August when Merchan rejected Trump's first recusal motion. Let's keep going, though. The judge should do the right thing and immediately recuse himself in order to show the American people that the Democrats have not destroyed our justice system completely. Him continuing to be involved in this crooked Joe Biden-directed witch hunt is a complete violation of applicable rules, regulations, and ethics. Schiff's campaign for U.S. Senate scored an eye-popping $20 million in aid since he began soliciting donations off the presumptive GOP presidential frontrunner's unprecedented 34-count indictment last April, according to Federal Elections Commission records. Trump has pleaded not guilty to felony counts of falsifying business records related to alleged hush money, just like Hillary Clinton did, payments that made to porn star Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. He has denied having affairs with both women. If convicted, he faces up to 4 years in prison. Now, this is where it gets even better, and this blew me away. Authentic Campaigns, and this is from Open Secrets. This is the judge's daughter who just prosecuted Trump. This is her marketing agency, political marketing agency, and these are some of her clients. This is just the first page. There's way more than this. But just look at this. This is like, number 1, Schiff for Congress. Number 2, John Tester, Montanans for Tester. Number 3, Tammy Baldwin for Senate. Number 4, Senate Majority PAC, which is a Democratic PAC. Number 5, Cory Booker for senator. These are all people that are paying the judge's daughter right now. Or this is, I mean, look, this is from the 2024 election cycle. All of these Democratic superstars gave this money to the judge's daughter who just convicted Trump. That's a massive, massive conflict of interest. And not a lot of people are talking about this either. Look at this. Here's the next page. Martin Heinrich for Senate. I don't know who he is. Jason Crow for Congress. I've heard the name. Fight Like Hell PAC, another, PAC that just donates blanket to Democratic senators. Friends of Mazie Hirono. I don't know who she is. Lauren Underwood. These are all, I'm sure, Democratic Congress people. Number 11, Tina Smith for Minnesota and Catherine Clark for Congress. Let's keep going, though. There's more. Believe it or not. Then you got Dan Goldman of New York. Okay, that right there is a very key player, because this is what I brought up the whole Marjorie Taylor Greene versus AOC thing for. That's how that fight started, because if you remember, Marjorie Taylor Greene goes, hey, which of these Democrats work on the judge's daughter's campaign? Now, this was an unrelated case, right? The hearing that they were in, they were talking about Merrick Garland. They were trying to get Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress because he won't share the audio of this. But it's all related in that these people are all working together to smear their political opponent in an election cycle. And Dan Goldman was in that committee. And then, it degenerated into your eyelashes, you're a bad built butch body. And no one in the press even went back and talked about this. Dan Goldman takes money from the judge's daughter, that's only 119. It's not near as much as, Adam Schiff or some of the people at the top took, but it's still, these people are all, and then Democratic Party of Arizona, Her Time PAC, Mervyn for Congress. These are all the people that are giving money to the judge's daughter that just convicted Donald Trump of, hush money, something that Hillary Clinton also did and got a slap on the wrist and a fine for. So
the guilty verdict that was handed down by the jury in Manhattan, because it's the message, I presume, that the Trump campaign is going to use. They're going to try and not just defensively insist that Trump hasn't really done anything meaningfully wrong or wrong at all, but they're going to affirmatively exploit this, or they're going to try to demonstrate that there is a massive and fundamental corruption in our justice system, that Democrats are using the justice system that Joe Biden has in his hands, that Democratic Party prosecutors have in their hands, to do everything possible to turn Trump into a criminal, a felon, a convicted felon before the election. In other words,
and there's proof. The proof is on their side. That's a good argument to make, because there's plenty of evidence, as I just showed you, that it is an organized political takedown more than anything else. Because if it wasn't, they would have done the same thing when Clinton got busted for funding the Steele dossier and misreporting it. And that judge would have recused himself, because his daughter makes millions upon millions of dollars from the Democratic Party and different Senate candidates.
Use the justice system for political ends. So let's just remember that Donald Trump has spent 5 decades in New York real estate and New Jersey real estate, and ultimately national building and national entertainment. And the world of New York real estate is not a pristine.
He had a fucking popular TV show on NBC.
World. It is a world where people constantly walk right up to the line of legality and often cross it. Now, I'm not saying Donald Trump ever crossed it, but it is very notable that in 50 years, with all kinds of business transactions of every sort, contracts with television networks to appear on television, contracts with all kinds of companies that he had his name on. Oftentimes it ended up in civil litigation, which is very common for businesses, but never once. He went through his entire life never once having been charged with a crime of any kind. And then suddenly Donald Trump becomes president. And now, by every poll, he is leading Joe Biden, not necessarily by a large amount, but in every poll consistently, he is the leader of the polls. And there's a lot of concern that Trump will beat Joe Biden. Suddenly now he gets indicted in 4 separate proceedings, all under the control of Democrats, and he now becomes a convicted felon for the first time at the age of 77.
That's such a great point that Glenn is making here. If these were serious accusations, they would have come up a long, long time ago. He's 77 years old and a convicted felon for the first time in his life.
Here is Trump's own response, which, as I said, I'm sure part of this is just anger. He had just walked out of the courtroom where he heard guilty verdict read 34 times. He has expressed all kinds of anger toward and criticisms of the judge who has presided over the case, who has become a liberal folk hero, as we showed you last night, precisely because he's been so vehemently anti-Trump in his treatment of the parties and the decisions he made and his comportment in the courtroom, because of course he's a Democrat in his bones. Nobody becomes...
His daughter runs a multi-million-dollar political campaign firm that serves exclusively Democrats.
Becomes a state court judge in Manhattan unless you have done a lot of work within the Democratic Party machine. It's a one-party town, not just New York City, but Manhattan. And it's obviously true. He has a daughter who's very active in the Democratic Party as well, but I don't even think you need to go to there.
That's an understatement.
To understand what this judge is. He proved it and demonstrated it over and over, and it's the reason why liberals adore him and love him so much. They even talk about him in terms of sexualizing him, as we showed you last night, the way they did with Robert Mueller and Michael Avenatti.
Remember, this is another sidebar I hadn't intended to take, but this is hilarious. Think about the track record of all these anti-Trump people that have been sexualized by liberals. Like, remember Andrew Cuomo during COVID? Liberal women were like, "Govern me, daddy." And Michael Avenatti, I remember that. Like, that guy was like the hottest thing. Girls were like, "Oh, he's so beautiful." All these liberal women, like, "Oh, Michael Avenatti." And then he gets convicted of some criminal bullshit. Just like, so the track record here is bad. And now this Judge Merchan guy is the next example.
And Jack Smith, anyone who they believe is eager to stop Trump and punish Trump, liberals turn into heroes, folk heroes, and start.
So you also have to think about the fact that makes it appealing to these people too. Like this Judge Merchan guy, he's a no-name judge until he becomes an anti-Trump judge, and suddenly he's like the talk of MSNBC and the Washington Post as a folk hero, like Glenn was saying.
Generating them. It's just that it's very odd. At least in those other cases, you're talking about prosecutors or political activists. Here you're talking about a judge whose primary duty is to be partial and neutral and unbiased, and this judge has become a hero among liberals and a hated figure among conservatives because that everyone knows the way in which he presided over this trial. So here's Trump, and he talks a lot about this judge, even though Trump knows that in about 2 months this judge will have to decide what his sentence should be, and that this judge has the power to send him to prison under the law, send him to jail under the law. He absolutely has that discretion, that autonomy. There's no question about that. And yet here's what Trump had to say, as obviously a lot of people were watching.
So listen to this little speech he gives. And just imagine if someone like AOC or Bernie on the left had responded to the types of attacks that they'd had against them in this way.
Are you worried about going to jail? This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
By the same token, it's also, I get it, it's hard to feel bad for Donald Trump. Like he's a fucking silver spooner who's had everything in his life handed to him on a silver plate. By the same token, you got to apply, if you have principles, because these same tactics have been and will be used against people you like Bernie Sanders. I keep going back to that, but I just have such vivid memories of being labeled as a misogynist and a racist, anti-angry Bernie bro, because of the way that the media spun that. And they're going to extremes to do it with Trump because he's actually a legitimate threat that they can't, the Democratic Party themselves can't squash.
The real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man. And
that statement right there is also like laughable. Come on, Trump. No, you're not.
It's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists. And they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one.
Big trouble.
With a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case. Never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
So aside from the, typical campaign sloganeering about immigrants and all that, there's a lot of truth there. The judge is completely has massive conflicts of interest. The juror selection and the whole setup is massively tilted in a certain direction, and it's messed up because again, eventually it's going to happen to someone you like, and that's when you're going to go, oh shit. You see it happening right now with these college protests. People like me and a lot of other intelligent people on the left, when the January 6th stuff started happening, we saw this coming. I went, okay, let's slow down a little bit. Let's kind of take the gas off a little bit. Let's slow down a little bit and not just listen to the hype around this and kind of look at the evidence and what's going on. But no, they're the worst. It's an insurrection. They're the worst people ever. It was okay. Suddenly police brutality is cool. It's cool for them to cap a girl without, cuffing her and arresting her because she's an insurrectionist or whatever you want to call it. So it completely, was the next gear in shifting Democrats into far-right neoconservative authoritarians. And so now you see that being used, these same tactics that they used during January 6th with the provocateurs and the way that the media frames it are being used on college campuses. And I got into it with one of my conservative friends just the other day because he's like, these college kids are useful idiots. And I'm just like, man, are you fucking kidding me? They did the same goddamn shit on January 6th, and you could see that it was a fraud. But here, you're in your feelings. You got Ben Shapiro and all your favorite little, conservative cucks telling you that the protesters are pro-Hamas or the most ridiculous shit ever. And it works because conservatives are emotional about Israel. I think it has a lot to do with the whole Christian, we got to have the Holy Land bullshit. But hey, what are you going to do about it? Anyway, continuing with this Trump theme here. Trump was on Tim Pool's podcast. Like, he did an actual interview with Tim Pool. And I want to cover a couple clips from this because, there's a lot that Trump says that sounds wild and stupid. Definitely. But there's also a lot of stuff he says that people completely gloss over. I saw like some of my friends on the left saying, oh, Trump said he'll bomb Russia and China if he gets elected. Like, I didn't see the clip. I would like to see it maybe. Like, I'm not saying he didn't say that, but also he says stuff like he says in some of these clips that's way more, I think, relevant because no one on the campaign trail right now is saying any of this stuff. So let's start here with basically this is the kind of the intro, I guess, to it's just Trump coming in and sitting. And I just want to show you this so you can see, first of all, how small he is next to Tim Pool.
I remember. Yeah. You complimented my face. I really do appreciate it.
Your beauty.
Thanks for sitting down. I really do appreciate it. So I know you don't have a lot of time, so I'll just we'll jump right in.
Okay, good.
We had a couple polls we went over on the show, on our show, IRL. Young people, surprisingly, immigration is a top issue for them now. I was talking to a young guy, he's 26. He says he's watching what's going on in New York. He owns a business. He can't afford to buy his own house. He struggles to be able to support a family. And I know that you've said that there's going to be the largest deportation effort in your next term. How do we do it?
So millions and millions of people are coming into our country, and it's not necessarily exactly what we want or had in mind. They have open borders where people just flow in, and many of those people are coming from prisons. Many of those people, frankly, are murderers and they're drug dealers, and they're coming from mental institutions, and they're coming from places that are not going to work very well. It's not going to be very good.
Do we still have mental institutions in the United States? I mean, that's kind of an odd claim to make, because I'm around the city of Los Angeles quite a bit, and I see a lot of homeless people, and 99% of them are mentally ill. Are they all immigrants? I don't think so. I think there is a lot of, like, anyway.
Good for our country. So we're going to start with that, and we have to get them out. No country can sustain what we're going through. I believe the number is 15, 16 million, could even be 17 million people right now.
Is
that's more than that's bigger than almost all of our states.
I think it's freaking out young people.
I mean, it's something to be concerned about. So the thing I like about Tim Pool is he asks really good questions. And this was a short interview, but he hit on a couple things that I really want to share with you. This one is about the deep state and the people that, last time Trump was president, he hired a lot of people that frankly did him dirty. And so he talks about that a little bit, but also I think one of the reasons people overlook that he was probably voted for by a lot of people is he had a show where he just fired people. And this, I think, is the sentiment that a lot of people have about Washington right now. They want people to be fired. People like Anthony Fauci, who have been in government for like 40 years, 50 years or whatever, should not be there still. And someone like Trump, to a lot of people who don't give a shit about the political establishment and the propaganda that's being pumped into their televisions and phones, they're just like, hey, I want someone different. I want someone who's not part of the established political class, who will come in and fire everyone, because these people suck. If they were doing anything good, we wouldn't be in the state we're in right now. But anyway, listen to Tim directly addresses this, and it's good.
There's two components to this. The first is many of the libertarians here, we want to see firings. We want to see in the bureaucracy corrupt
I agree.
individuals, the bloat. On top of that, without getting into the specifics for obvious reasons, the things that they're doing to you with the court system is not just to you. It is to me. It is to everyone who voted for you in 2020.
It's true.
Are we going to get some good personnel in as Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and in the CIA,
right,
and see some prosecutions?
So we had some great people because our trade numbers were fantastic. The jobs we did on trade, the jobs we did, frankly, in the military underneath the terrible television generals who were absolutely terrible, but we have incredible people. We defeated ISIS, and we had no new wars because they were concerned with us. I had no wars at all. I finished off a war that we were in for 20 years.
So you can argue that Trump's administration did some stuff while he was president that was aggressive. Like the whole thing in Venezuela obviously was a fucking catastrophe and something that his administration pushed. And I'm sure he was behind on some level. But you have to admit that even this rhetoric, the fact that this rhetoric is like mainstream in today's Republican Party, I had no new wars, and that's something to be proud of, is definitely a step in the right direction. Because once he's president, if he's making this claim, then you can really hold him accountable and go, hey, you said no new wars, bro. Like that's when a lot of people are going to hate me if Trump gets reelected, because I'm going to flip to criticizing who's in charge. I'm going to flip to criticizing Trump. Right now, the people in power are doing completely terrible things. So they're the ones who have the ire of anyone who's honest. But once that baton changes hands, it's going to flip if you're honest. So,
but we had no wars. And we have to get the right people. It's all about the people. So when I first came here, I was only in Washington 17 times in my life. All of a sudden, I'm president. And I really knew nobody. I relied on people. Some were good, some were rhinos, some gave us some bad advice. And
So that right there could explain what I just told, like with the Guaido Venezuela thing. I mean, that Guaido thing very much seems like a John Bolton move. And Trump hired John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, I'm sure by the recommendation of the party or something. Once the thing is, and Steve Bannon said this too, like once they got in, they kind of like, they were the populist insurgents in the Republican Party, and they won, unlike Bernie Sanders, who was stomped by the Democrats. And so once they got in, they had to kind of build a coalition with the establishment Republicans. And I think at the end of the day, that really hurt them, Extra Bola in the chat. Yeah, he raised something like 50. They said 35. The reports are different. I mean, again, man, I will, like, if it comes down to it and the ballot is like Trump and Biden, I live in California, so my vote's not going to matter really, but I'll vote for Trump just because of this, just because they're so obviously coming at him at a level that I've never seen them do this to anyone. So
generally speaking, we had very good people, but we had some that we have to do better. Attorney General, we have to get a.
Also, I like what he said here again, too, because he kind of said, he's like, I was only in Washington 17 times. And I've heard his son say this, too. They were done dirty by the establishment. So, say what you will about Trump. He says no new wars, but he did do some kind of warlike shit. If, you could blame that, as a president, the buck should stop with him, of course, because he's the one who appointed these people. But, he does have that defense. So, and it does seem valid.
Great attorney general. And I'd work with the Libertarian Party on that. I think it's very good because, I view the Libertarian Party as almost a party of common sense, largely of common sense. And I say that about the Republican Party, too. We're a party of common sense. You want borders, but you want fairness. You want a lot of things that a lot of other people don't talk about. So we will.
One thing I want to say, too, here is you'll notice like a lot of the footage they play of Trump to say that he's some wild, crazy motherfucker is footage from rallies when he's on a stage playing to an audience. When you get him in this type of format where he's like sitting down in a one-on-one environment and talking to someone directly, listen to how cognitive he sounds, especially when you A/B him against Joe Biden, the guy who's actually in the White House right now.
Work with a lot of people to get the right people in. The difference is I now know sort of everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm not having to be relying on people that I didn't know very well and listen to their recommendations. And I think we're going to have phenomenal people. I know the people. I know the good ones, the bad ones, the weak ones, the strong ones. I think we're going to have great people.
We're friends with Kash Patel. He was on the show just before you, and that gives me a lot of confidence.
Yeah. Kash is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got to say, too, I didn't include this clip, but if you watch this whole stream, it's good. They start with Kash Patel, who worked in the Trump administration and has a book called Government Gangsters, all about the deep state and stuff. Tim and Luke actually went at Kash Patel about Julian Assange, and it's really good. And Kash Patel kind of argues like, no, I think Julian Assange got what he deserved because he was. And Tim and Luke were like, no, bro, he's been incarcerated for 15 years. We think he's kind of served his time even if you believe that what he did was immoral or illegal or whatever. And so that's a really good debate. And another reason, I love going into the weeds with some of these more right-leaning pundits like Tim, because Tim, I mean, there's a lot of stuff he says that I think is foolish. Especially, it's a lot of like that conservative hysteria type stuff. But on stuff like Assange and free speech and like the wars and stuff, he's rock solid and in line with a lot of the real leftist viewpoints. So,
an example of a good one.
Yep.
We have some great people.
So this gets actually better. I have a couple really good clips. So now this is one of my favorite clips in the bunch, and it's where they talk about the war state. And Trump says some things in here that I'm going to stop it because I think they're so important. So listen to this.
With the timeline for getting out of Afghanistan,
Right.
When you tried to get our troops out of Syria, my question is, why are we in Syria? Who even knew?
Yeah.
And they lied to you, and they lied to us about the number of troops in there. And so maybe it's a bit blunt for me to say I want to see people prosecuted for the lies to the American people. But in terms of foreign policy, perhaps it's a little bit of a biased interview, but I think you're the greatest president of my lifetime.
I appreciate it.
And ending the wars that we shouldn't.
That sounded a little Stanny, but then he says, when I watched it again, he prefaced it with, in terms of foreign policy, you're the greatest president of my lifetime.
Not have been involved in. Now the fear is World War III.
Yeah.
What are you looking at when you enter your next term to stopping the escalation?
Well, first of all, I'm the only one that is going to stop World War III, because this man can't put two sentences together. He doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know where he is. And amazingly, it's
Again, the cognitive, differences between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, regardless of age, are starkly different. Like it's night and day.
seems like he's going to be running. It's a lot of people say, do you think he'll make it to the starting gate? Well, we'll see what happens. But if you look at Viktor Orban, because we don't want to see wars. I don't want to see wars. I was in no wars other than we finished a war with ISIS.
Number of troops in there.
Oh God.
And
Orban, because we don't want to see wars. I don't want to see wars.
Who is saying that on the campaign trail? We don't want to see wars. I don't want to see wars. That kind of candor, again, is probably why they have 4 court cases open against the guy right now.
I was in no wars other than we finished a war with ISIS, and we completed it, 100% complete. But I don't want to see wars. I think it's so horrible, so unnecessary.
If you remember, too, that war with ISIS he's talking about, guess who we worked with? Russia. Russia helped us defeat ISIS in Syria.
So costly in terms of lives and money in that order, and destroying these countries. You're destroying culture. When you look at Ukraine, that would have never happened if I were president. You look at the October 7th attack on Israel, it would have never happened.
I look at your policies, I see.
That is so fucking progressive. You're destroying culture. Why are we destroying these countries? Who is saying that on the left?
Secure the borders, bring jobs
Right.
back. I look at the Democrats and many Republicans, and it's foreign war and foreign expansion.
That's right.
What is that?
I think it's just a failed mentality. It's crazy. You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see.
You can solve problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. Holy shit.
Recently, they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do that. You can talk in such a way where they respect you and they listen to you. Viktor Orban of Hungary, the leader, they call him a strong man. Who cares?
I mean, based on the court cases and that statement right there alone, I got to admit it, I would vote for Trump.
If he's a strong man or not a strong man, he's a very powerful guy. He said the problem the world has is that Donald Trump is no longer president. When he was president, China didn't play around. Russia.
Now, this kind of stuff gets ridiculous. This is like the, oh, you're so cute, Trump, with your I'm the best at everything.
Russia didn't play around. Nobody played around. And we had no problems. Today, the whole world is on fire.
I heard that funny, there's a conversation from a phone call.
We didn't have no problems, but he's not completely wrong about
where
that.
you said that there was they maybe thought there was a 5% chance you'd nuke them.
That's right.
And so they kept them in line. It's kind of scary to think about, but you take a look at the weakness we have now.
So this next clip, they get into the Ukraine war. And I just, again, listen to what he says about this. There's no one in mainstream of either party saying stuff like this about this. It's fucking mind-blowing.
I'll bring it back to the economy. This young guy I was talking to about immigration. Actually, I'll put it this way. There's a viral video where a young man screaming that we're sending hundreds of billions to a country no one's ever heard of. Right. And young people are hurting in this country. Do you see any direct economic policy that is on your list for 2025?
Direct economic, but also direct in terms of warfare. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars all around the world. But when you look at Ukraine, we're giving all of this money. Europe, which is much more affected by that war than us, is spending just a tiny fraction of what we're spending. And you say, does anybody at least get involved in this? But more importantly, I will end that war. I'll get it ended. Putin respects me. Zelensky respects me. I know all the players. And I want to get that war ended. That's a horrible war. It's a terrible, there's no good war, but that's a horrible war. And to think it would have never started.
I want to get it ended. I will end that war. Fuck.
It would have never started. If the election turned out like it should have turned out, that war would have never started. I mean, and you know, the number of lives we're talking about is far greater than the numbers that you hear. When they blow up a town, or when they blow up these buildings, these massive buildings, surprisingly, I mean, these are big. That was my business. These are big, powerful buildings.
So when he says something like that, because the first time I heard that, I thought it was kind of dumb. I was like, what? This is my business. I built these big, powerful buildings. What he's saying is the bombs that they're dropping are powerful enough to fucking decimate these very massive, well-built structures that he has experience building. So he knows how strong they are and how fucking devastating the bombs we're dropping are, because they're taking out big, strong buildings with ease.
And they come tumbling down to the ground. And
I translate Trump. Thank you.
they say nobody was injured. A lot of people were killed.
Yeah.
And the numbers are a lot different than you think. When you will see that happening. When those numbers really get announced, you're going to see it. It's much worse than people think.
That is crazy. Again, it is just fucking insane that Donald Trump is the voice of reason in the 2024 political cycle. And every time now I see some shit, it's always taken out of context. That stupid bloodbath comment is a great example that the media ran with. Like, oh, he said there'll be a bloodbath if I'm not elected. Yes, metaphorically in the auto industry, dipshit. If you watch the whole clip, these people forget we have the internet. So to close this one out, the very last kind of, item that they discuss is Fauci and the COVID thing. And we're going to go into the weeds a little bit on this too. Because I did a little bit of research on something he says here. So listen to this.
I believe this one of their presidential nominees said he wants to see Fauci, the heads of Moderna, Pfizer, Biden, and you locked up for what happened during COVID. I don't agree with them, but there is a big sentiment. Elon Musk tweeted, prosecute Fauci. Fauci lied to Congress about the gain-of-function research that was going on, and now we have testimony.
Well, I'm the one that stopped the funding, and this was funding from before me. I'm the one that stopped the funding.
So now, this is one of the things where I went, nah, I always heard that Obama stopped the funding and they got it approved during your administration. Because Trump is the kind of guy who's like, he'll rubber stamp something if he thinks it's good for business. And Extra Bulla had this comment. Trump had a chance to cut the defense budget when he was president, but increased it instead. And I think that's why. I think, I'm not defending him. I don't think anyone should increase the defense budget. It's fucking already 20 times what it should be. But I think his viewpoint is like, oh, well, we need this money. It's going to be good for workers. It's going to be good for the economy. And, we got to keep spending money to be safe or whatever. I'm sure that it has some kind of an economic back, his logic behind it, or the people that sold it to him anyway. Like I was saying, I think a lot of people misled him. And I'm not defending him. He's big, powerful Trump. He should tell him to shut the fuck up. But it is a valid excuse. So anyway, what he just said about the COVID thing, he said that he was the one who stopped gain-of-function research. So I want to just touch on this real quick. This is from CIDRAP at the University of Minnesota, and it's from December 19th of 2017, which is after he was elected. But this is the weird part about it. Yeah, it's a year after he was elected, right? So Feds lift gain-of-function research, pause, offer guidance. The National Institutes of Health, our favorite organization over here, today lifted a 3-year moratorium on funding of gain-of-function research on potential pandemic viruses such as avian flu, SARS, and MERS, opening the door for certain types of research to resume. And this was December 19th, 2017, 2 years before the world stopped. The action coincides with today's release of a U.S. Department of Health and Human Services framework for guiding funding decisions about proposed research involving pathogens that have enhanced potential for creating pandemics. Now, that was 2017. Let's go back and see what happened under Obama. So, according to this article from what is this? California Healthline Daily Edition, Obama administration. This is Wednesday, October 22nd, 2014, 3 years before the last headline where they lifted the ban on gain of function. Obama administration freezes gain of function research on influenza, other pathogens. So that checks out. Obama administration on Friday, the Obama administration announced it had temporarily halted funding, new gain of function research that involves making influenza or other pathogens more transmissible or deadly. The funding freeze comes after experts last month criticized the federal government for not addressing gain of function research in its guidelines for dual use research of concern or research on pathogens that can be used for legitimate reasons and also for biowarfare. So this is actually the official statement from the Obama website, from the government archive. And this is what that says. Doing diligence to assess the risks and benefits of life sciences gain of function research. Summary: the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and Department of Health and Human Services today announced that the U.S. government is launching a deliberative process to assess the potential risks and benefits associated with a subset of life sciences research known as gain of function studies. Following recent biosafety incidents at federal research facilities, the U.S. government has taken a number of steps to promote and enhance the nation's biosafety and biosecurity, including immediate and longer-term measures to review activities specifically related to the storage and handling of infectious agents. So, he's kind of being disingenuous there, I thought. But then I found this. And check this out. This is from Fox News. So, it's obviously slanted a little bit towards the Republican argument, but let's see what it says. It seems pretty valid. Fauci misled Trump administration on gain of function research in Wuhan, book claims. Fauci has denied funding gain of function research that creates new deadly viruses. This is by Emma Colton from Fox News, was published October 21st of 2021. So here's what this says. This is the proof they have here. A new book from an investigative Australian reporter dives into how Anthony Fauci reportedly misled the Trump administration on gain of function research in China. So you could argue that, I did argue that Obama was actually the one who paused it, but then Trump lifted the ban. But here they're saying Fauci kind of told him it was okay. Fauci's public persona as a cautious, careful medical professional is contradicted by his central role in kickstarting exceptionally fraught gain of function research in the United States. After the ban introduced in the Obama era, along with his role in funding coronavirus research in China, is in unsafe laboratories that intelligence agencies suspect may have sparked the pandemic. Intelligence agencies suspect. Sherry Markson details in her new book what really happened in Wuhan. The book, released late last month, details how Fauci tried to convince White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to return funding to a research project in China, which was run by a U.S. nonprofit called EcoHealth Alliance. The funding to EcoHealth was suddenly terminated last year after a decade of the project studying bats in China to identify coronaviruses. Tony, you have to take it up with the boss. Meadows is the one making this call. Former Secretary of Health and Human Services Alex Azar told Fauci after the director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases complained about the sudden termination of the funds, according to excerpts of the book reviewed by Fox News. So, maybe Trump's being disingenuous there, but it looks like he was probably misled about this research. So let's keep going.
He wasn't a big player in my administration like he was after I left. I mean, Biden made him the king of everything. And if you take a look at that, Fauci was not the big player with me that he was. And in fact, I did things that he didn't want to do. He wanted to keep it open to China. I said, you got to close it to China because it was all coming out of China. It was coming out of Wuhan, which I said right at the beginning. But the other thing is, and what people don't realize, I believe in federalism. I gave the power to governors. Some governors did a great job.
Now, this is important because if you remember, everyone said that Trump was a fascist and stuff, but when COVID came and he had the ability to take the reins of the government to himself, like he could have imposed martial law, he kicked it out to the states.
In all cases, they were Republicans. And some, like in South Carolina, Henry McMaster, kept everything open. Others didn't. The Democrats did a bad job, very bad job. But basically, I gave that power over the states. I gave it to the governor.
I mean, I can speak to this a little bit because I had to go to a funeral in Utah. I live in LA, and I had to go to a funeral in Utah during the pandemic, and it was wildly different up there. Yeah, people wore masks. Yeah, people got vaccines, but it wasn't a forced thing. It was like they made you, a lot of people, they didn't make you wear it to the store, but some people wore it. They didn't force anyone. And I thought that was a much better, obviously more libertarian way of handling things than California did. Now, you could argue that it's a much different situation. There's a lot more people in California, but I also live kind of out where there's a dividing line between Los Angeles and Ventura County, and Ventura County is a lot more kind of blue collar and rural than Los Angeles is, and they kind of were a little bit more relaxed about things during that time. So, arguments could be made that the autonomy of communities to do that on their own was the right move.
Back to the states, and I think it's something which, when people realize that, it's something that they respect.
So this last clip, no, that's it. We're done with Trump for the day. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you love Trump, but that's it for the Trump material for today. Moving on, we got a piece about your boy Thomas Massie, and this guy, I have grown. I really disliked him on the whole gun thing, but I gotta say, I think the integrity that this guy has maybe even shifted my views on that a little bit. So watch this. This is a piece from Rising where they talk about how Thomas Massie is one of the only
somewhat surprising position.
One of the only Republicans who's actually in opposition to funding the war in Gaza.
When it comes to the Israel-Hamas war and getting a lot of flack for it, Kentucky Republican Representative Thomas Massie calls himself a true conservative. He recently joined Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene in a failed vote to oust Speaker Johnson. But when it comes to war, the nation's national affairs correspondent John Nichols points out that he's siding with progressives. Here's Massie explaining his position to Glenn Greenwald back in December.
What is your view on the overall U.S. support for Israel in terms of money, and what's your view specifically of President Biden's new request for $14 billion more, at least to start with, to fund this new war?
Well, let me be clear. I don't single out any country with my ideology. I don't support foreign aid. My position is that we are almost $34 trillion in debt. We can't afford to help other countries. A lot of times foreign aid is taking from the middle class in one country and giving it to the rich in another country. And in the case of Israel, their debt to GDP is in a better position than our debt to GDP. So I don't, particularly with respect to Israel, I don't understand why we have to send them money from my constituents in Kentucky.
Racist!
Now, for that fairly reasonable take, he has been
anti-Semitism,
been targeted by AIPAC and survived that challenge. Here to break it all down with us is John Nichols himself. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be with both of you.
All right, so help us understand what happened. What was the scale of the AIPAC?
No, I'm critical of anyone who writes for The Nation, but I think this guy is pretty solid.
Attack on Massie, and what happened?
Well, I think we have to put it in perspective. Remember that AIPAC has made it clear that they want to go after a number of members of Congress who they view as voting in a way that is unsatisfactory to them and is unsatisfactory to their position, which is very pro Netanyahu government. in Israel. And most of the media coverage of that is suggested, oh, well, they're going after Democrats. They're going after members of the Squad.
That's like how they're trying to minimize this. Like, oh, it's just Netanyahu. If we just replace Netanyahu, everything will be okay. It's the Netanyahu
AOC and Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman and folks like that. One of the things I wanted to point out is that there is a Republican who has frequently voted with the Squad on some of these issues and with more progressive Democrats on some of these issues. Believe me, he breaks with them on everything else, just about, but has voted with them on these issues. He, too, has been targeted by AIPAC. And
I did a piece a couple months ago now, where Massie was praising AOC and Ilhan Omar for being against the override switch in vehicles that would like allow the government or people to like take over control of your car. So they align on quite a few things, I think.
AIPAC's been going after Massie on a
maybe not quite a few, but a couple at least.
Couple of levels. They say they're not playing in particular congressional races, that they're more broadly trying to educate Kentuckians about Thomas Massie. In part, that's because I think they fear that when Mitch McConnell's Senate seat comes open, Massie may well run for it. But in the run-up to Massie's primary, which was a week ago, or a little roughly, AIPAC came in with a very substantial amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, in advertising that identified Massie as, a bad player as regards Middle East politics and portrayed him as a very dangerous figure, et cetera, et cetera. And instead of kind of brushing it off, Massie made a big deal about it. He said, look, these folks are coming after me because of the votes I've cast, because of where I stand.
So that goes back to what Trump's response to the indictment. Like, people respect when you have the balls to stand up to this bullshit.
And so it became an issue that people were conscious of in the district. And Massie won 76% of the vote, an overwhelming landslide. And one of his opponents, I don't think his opponents were all that strong, but one of his opponents was a former Republican, former candidate for the Republican nomination for the governorship in Kentucky. So it wasn't exactly a low-profile opponent. And Massie just swept. And the point that he has made is that he believes it is possible to stand up to critics, especially on some of these issues. And it is, I think, a very interesting...
In the new media landscape, whether it's in politics or entertainment or whatever, people respect integrity and honesty and someone who's willing to stand with their principles despite all of the fucking noise around them. And this is one of the reasons I want to show this, because it's inspiring to me that a guy like Thomas Massie he's gonna win. There's a potential he could be the senator now, and the people of Kentucky saw through the bullshit.
Note as regards sort of the broader politics of these issues in 2024.
Yeah, if I was running as a Republican in a deeply red district in Kentucky or a state like that, I would want some ideological opponent to highlight how opposed I was to foreign aid. The idea that, he would say this is not at all.
I love the way Thomas Massie framed that too, because did you hear what he said? He said, what I see is taking from the middle class in one country and giving to the rich in another country. That's our foreign policy.
A deviation from his conservative philosophy or from his fiscal conservatism. On the contrary, Republicans who say they're for small government or for fixing the debt or doing any of those things, but are happy to both support policies that interfere abroad and then ship American tax dollars overseas, those are the people criticizing their principles. He's saying,
sound drop.
Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? Isn't it ironic?
He's perfectly consistent, and when his constituents hear about this, this is the America First view that Donald Trump purports to represent. I would argue incredibly imperfectly, and that would be, even saying that is kind of a compliment he doesn't deserve. But this is the actual ideology of the Republican base: is yes, to be more non-interventionist, to not support foreign military entanglement, and to not send American tax dollars overseas.
And people who think that way will be called isolationists, which is like, a way to call someone racist when they oppose foreign wars. No, I'm not even against supporting other countries in the right circumstance, when there's a really good, legitimate reason to do so. But this just like funneling our money to other countries. Like I've played I've shown you the graph that shows like foreign policy investments over the years that just, it's like billions and billions as countries shift up and down. And it's crazy. As things crumble around us, like who with any kind of common sense can support that? So anyway, listen to this. I thought this was good. Bree kind of explains the attack ads that they ran against Massie, that AIPAC ran against them.
Intensity of the attack on Massie and the amount of money that AIPAC was able to spend. It bought $300,000 of ads in the lead up to this election. And one of those ads read, "Israel, the Holy Land, is under attack by Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Congressman Tom Massie." That was the nature of this attack. And in this case,
Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Thomas Massie. Same thing. This is how ridiculous this whole debate, this whole argument has gotten. Like I love when people call the Hamas or like the people in Gaza the Nazis, or try to equate them to the Nazis, as if them getting stomped has any parallels whatsoever to the Nazis. They don't even have a state. They don't have an army. They don't have tanks. They don't have missiles or air, warfare tactics. They like live in tunnels under the ground, and we're supposed to believe they've been driven into tunnels under the ground, and we're supposed to believe they're the Nazis. Okay.
obviously, he was not only successful, he was overwhelmingly successful in a way that kind of can be read as an indictment of AIPAC's strategy. However, that has not been the outcome in so many other races. AIPAC brags about.
This is actually really good and something to watch for, because what Bree describes right here is so important. They're going to realize that running those ads like that against, they pay consultants millions upon millions of dollars to study and come up with messaging. They're going to realize that hey, he's with Hamas, or, he's anti-Israel, or he's anti-foreign entanglements message isn't going to work, and they're going to adjust to something more effective. So listen to this.
What a good kind of win-loss ratio it has. I have covered a great deal about progressives who have come under attack, including, I think, most notoriously Nina Turner in Ohio's 11th district, where AIPAC took a slightly different approach. And I want to ask you whether you think that AIPAC is shifting strategy here. In that race, they did not foreground the idea that Nina Turner is sort of bad for Israel, as it were. What they did was try to smear her as not a genuine progressive. For example, sending out.
That is so key right there, because that's an attack that works with Democrats. I don't think it might work on the libertarian right with someone like Thomas Massie, but you have to remember that whenever you see these interlopers and these people that come in on Twitter I won't rally with right wingers because they're anti-trans or whatever, that is this type of thing. That is Israel, not Israel, but this is like political money being used to fucking market and turn movements against each other. And that's exactly what they're like she said with Nina Turner. They kind of indicted her. They what's the word? Sculpted their messaging to be like, oh, look at Nina Turner. She's not a real progressive. She likes cops because her husband is a cop or something like that. So that's the kind of stuff they can use to sink the left. I don't know that that's going to work as well with someone like Thomas Massie, but they'll find something that does. They'll keep spending millions and millions of dollars until something does stick. So be aware of that.
Flyers that characterized her vote against the DNC platform as a vote criticizing the platform because it was too progressive, when in fact it was because it was not progressive enough. And it seemed like AIPAC was self-conscious of looking like it was a foreign lobbying group that was interfering in domestic elections and putting a bad taste in voters' mouth who might not be personally invested in Israel per se. I do wonder what you make of the explicit nature of AIPAC's strategy in Massie's race, and whether you think the kind of shifting political attitudes toward Israel because of the way it's conducting its military campaign in Gaza is going to have an effect on AIPAC's ability to spend in these races.
You put a lot of important issues on the table. And the first thing that I think it's important to understand is we're talking about super PAC associated with AIPAC. And super PACs tend to hire sophisticated political insiders to figure out how best to approach different races. And that's important to understand. That happens across the board. It's not just AIPAC or super PACs associated with it. They look for the strategy that they think will work best in a particular setting. I think that by and large, we have seen circumstances where the attacks have been and probably will continue to be on other issues, not necessarily on Israel, right? or not necessarily on Gaza. And I think you're going to continue to see that in many of these races where Democrats are targeted. In Kentucky, I think what happened was, and again, this is speculation to some extent, but I think they were thinking, Kentucky has a very, very large Christian fundamentalist, Christian conservative bloc of voters, and many of them have been given a lot of messages as regards Christian Zionism and maybe Christian support for Israel. And I think they felt that this ad might drive a wedge, right? That it might convince some portion of voters, very conservative voters, that Thomas Massie wasn't their guy.
Well, it didn't work, thankfully. But I just wanted to highlight this mostly because cheers to Thomas Massie for having real values and actually sticking to them. And then second, just to watch for this type of, like, this guy went really into the weeds on the type of political machinations that get used to throw out people that are generally pretty good. Like, I might disagree with Nina Turner on some stuff, but overall she's got the right idea. You know what I mean? And it's like, so the person that they ended up getting into Congress instead of Nina Turner is way worse. She's like a total scumbag. So we as voters and human beings have to be watching for this kind of shit, because it happens all the time. And for the record,
I've not yet begun to defile myself.
So I got some more stuff happening here for you. What do I got next in the on the agenda? All right, we're going to move on to one of my favorite people, one of my heroes, Max Blumenthal on Judge Napolitano's show. But before we do that, I saw Jennifer talking about these guys. Yeah. Okay. So these are all okay. So these are we're going back. She jumped in a little bit late, but we were talking about the list of people who worked for the judge's daughter that prosecuted Trump, the list of Democratic congressmen who worked with Authentic Campaigns, which is the company Judge Merchan's daughter runs that serves exclusively Democrats. And Jason Crow is one of those guys. Anyway, let's jump into Max and the judge, because this is a piece of news, and I really only heard it because Jimmy Dore highlighted it the other day on his stream. But the Biden administration is basically looking to get us into a nuclear war, and it's a little bit sad and scary, but here's the scoop.
There is some breaking news both in Ukraine and in Israel, and I'm happy that you're here to have me address it. The first is, Politico is reporting that President Biden has authorized the Ukrainians and their Americans that are showing them how to do this, advisors, to use American-made offensive weaponry and aim it inside Russia. How crazy is this?
You know what I thought of when he said this that a lot of people have already forgotten about? Remember that terrorist attack that happened in Russia recently? Remember that? That was wild. The ISIS terrorist attack that just happened.
Well, it's especially crazy considering what the Ukrainians have already done, where they're not hitting military targets inside Russia. They're hitting Christmas festivals. They're hitting the Kerch Bridge. They're attacking civilian targets. They've carried out terror attacks and assassinations on civilians, including a foreign policy analyst, Daria Dugina, with a car bombing. So what are they going to do now that they have ATACMS missiles and the full authorization of Congress? And what good is it going to do? The reason that the Biden administration is lobbying for this insane measure is because Ukraine is losing the war. Russia's advancing on Kharkiv. And previously, they've said that Lloyd Austin said the purpose of the military aid was to help Ukraine win in the close fight. But they're losing the close fight because they're unable to get reinforcements. Ukrainian polling shows in February that only 35% of Ukrainian males are willing to be conscripted.
Funny story. There's a guy, I posted a video I think it's called Ukrainistan or something, talking about how like Ukraine is the new Afghanistan. And this guy commented and he goes, "What would you do if you woke up in Ukraine?" And I said, "Probably," he's like, what would you be doing if you woke up in Ukraine? I said, "Probably trying to avoid getting conscripted into a bullshit war for fucking US imperialism."
There's no close fight left. So they're trying to prolong this war, which, as Biden and his lieutenants, Victoria Nuland, Tony Blinken, have openly said, is financially
Wait, did he say
profitable.
Tony Blinken?
Keep on bombing lots of people.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
For the United States. Something like 60 billion of the 95 billion in the supplemental to Israel and Ukraine is going straight back into the U.S. economy, to the upper and upper middle class, working.
From now on, whenever anyone brings up Tony Blinken, we go to this.
Keep on bombing lots of people.
You're welcome.
Defense industry. The Wall Street Journal reported that the Biden administration sees that military aid producing new jobs in states like Pennsylvania and Arizona as helping their electoral prospects in November. So blood for votes. And so they want to escalate this war. They want to keep escalating so it can continue to go on. And they're going to provoke Russia in ways that we haven't seen before. And what's Russia going to do? We've seen that at every point Ukraine has tried to escalate, Russia has been able to climb a step up the ladder further than Ukraine by hitting electrical infrastructure. That's what Russia did for the first time after the Kerch Bridge attack. Now it's taking out water purification plants, sanitation plants. It's going to destroy Ukraine's infrastructure completely as it's provoked to do so by the U.S. and for the.
Can you imagine what's going to happen if the Ukraine levels a serious attack inside of Russia? What? It's just insane. And I mean, again, it's I just showed these clips of Trump saying, "I'll end that war tomorrow." I'll end the war. I'll end the war. No one else on the campaign trail is saying that. So,
past few days, the military leadership of the Pentagon has been lobbying and pushing members of Congress, having closed-door meetings with the House Armed Services Committee against bipartisan pressure, with lawmakers from both sides saying, what the hell are we trying to accomplish here? Ukraine is losing. Why are we going to provoke Russia any further? And the military saying, no, we need to do this. We're going to win, as they've.
So when Max explained this too, just a quick sidebar. I totally envision you see these Congress people and they're like, this is it makes them feel like they're, cool and in on some top secret confidential stuff when the military comes in and sequesters them in these hearings. We have this top secret thing to tell you that we're gonna bomb Ukraine because Putin is the most terrible person ever. And then they Mike Johnson, how quick they turned him. He's like, I saw some classified stuff and that made me go, we need to send money to Ukraine right now. So that, these military people go in and basically, what's the word? Cuck Congress and into thinking hey, look, you guys, we've got this secret intelligence that says our super secret intelligence says that Putin is going to take over Afghanistan tomorrow. So we need to invade whatever. So we need to invade Ukraine because he's going to take over Afghanistan.
Said all along, I think we're just going to.
That was just a really stupid thing to say, but it's it's something that would make sense to American foreign policy experts.
More escalation with Russia being dominant in the end, and more profits for the military industry and Biden's donors.
So in this bit, they are going to talk a little bit about, they're going to pivot to the Gaza thing and talk a little bit about the, why it's gotten to the point that it's gotten, I guess. Listen to this.
Democracy, when it's based on ethno-supremacy, which is the height of racism and apartheid.
So it's funny because people in the Democratic Party will argue that Trump and the MAGA people are ethno-supremacists, white nationalists who want America to be a Christian fascist state, an ethno-supremacist Christian state. And that's a bad thing, but they're totally fine with it in Israel, it being an ethno-supremacist Jewish state, where, to be a serious member of the society, you have to be a member of the Jewish faith.
Yeah, I mean, when we have an election in November, technically everyone's allowed to vote here. In Israel, just imagine if the United States government controlled all U.S. territory, but only about 50% of people were allowed to vote because of their religion. That's Israel. Millions of people under Israeli control, and Israelis exerting more control over the Gaza Strip now than it ever has, will not be able to vote in the next Israeli election because they are not Jewish and therefore cannot be citizens of the state of Israel, because the system of Zionism, the definition or essence of Zionism, is that a Jew anywhere in the world, anyone who can prove that their mother was Jewish before the Israeli rabbinate, has more rights than a Palestinian who is a direct descendant of the apostles, whose family has lived in that land for thousands of years. That's the essence of Zionism. And so I have no connection to the land of Israel, except I can, through the Bible? I'm a white person from America. I have more rights than Bassem Tamimi. Bassem Tamimi has bluish eyes and light skin, and many of the people in his village have blonde hair because they intermingled their blood as indigenous Palestinians with the Crusaders. That's how far back they go. And I have more rights than him in his own home as a Jew.
Because your mother is Jewish.
Because my mother's Jewish. And all I have to do is come to Israel, to Ben Gurion Airport, tell the lady who asks, "Are you Jewish?" At the customs line. All I have to do is tell her I'm Jewish. Then I go in, declare that I want to be a citizen. I can then join the Israeli army. And as a reservist, I can go into Bassem Tamimi's home and arrest his children and his grandchildren if I wanted to.
Now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I am not Jewish. So I did not know any of this stuff before this recent outbreak of violence in the Middle East. So I think I'm not alone either, in that a lot of people are learning this stuff. And that is fucking insane. Like, I had no idea that that's how it worked. That is fucking crazy. So this last clip, Max kind of talks about the reason Israel exists. And I think this is such an interesting point that he makes about what fuels this movement. Listen to this.
Israelis accept Zionism, this apartheid form of government. A question.
So the judge asked him, does a majority of Israelis accept this?
Just read. Doesn't Zionism harm Jewish people for the reasons you just articulated?
Well, whatever cultural force influences people, whether it's people from the LGBTQ community in Tel Aviv, whose pride parade was just canceled, and the rainbow flag has had its yellow stripe expanded in displays across Tel Aviv because yellow is identified with the hostages in Gaza, whether it's them or fanatical religious nationalist settlers in Hebron and Kiryat Arba. They all tend to believe that if they give 1 inch to the Palestinians, the next Holocaust will take place. And they need to display total ruthlessness because they are settler colonists and they have nowhere to fall back to if the Palestinians gain any sovereignty. And so I think the ultimate cultural force in Israeli life, besides the Bible and besides the rabbinate, particularly the religious nationalist rabbinate, is the religious nationalist religious forces. Besides that is the Holocaust and the idea that Israel represents not just deliverance from Jewish perpetual persecution, but also its continuation. And in some ways, it's true in a self-realizing perverse way. Israel aims to perpetuate anti-Semitism in order to justify its own existence. And so
That's a very interesting point.
through the violence that we're seeing disseminated in ways that are more graphic and intimate than ever before, where you can just open up your phone, log on to Twitter, and watch children being exterminated, blown to pieces, having their heads blown off in Gaza. A Syrian child was blown to pieces by Israel recently. People are becoming infuriated, and people who are less politically sophisticated, more reactionary, might tend to blame all Jews. They're also seeing.
Imagine, like, I love to make these kind of comparisons, but imagine being like a pro-life anti-abortion activist and supporting the war in Gaza. Like, there are plenty of them, but imagine that, like, being able to like see this slaughter of babies and children, women, and then go like, I'm pro-life.
Jewish billionaires demand that Joe Biden or Donald Trump or New York Mayor Eric Adams support Israel's agenda and basically legally bribe them to do so. So anti-Semitism tends to rise in moments like this, and that benefits Israel. Benefits Israel because they're saying the whole world is completely corrupted by Gentile hatred of Jews, and you all have to come here. And it also benefits forces like the Anti-Defamation League. What would happen to Jonathan Greenblatt's salary, CEO of the ADL, without anti-Semitism? He'd have to go back to his business as a
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
The ultimate engine for anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is the fuel for Israel's occupation genocide machine.
I think my Kanye sample kind of stepped on Max's joke about Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL have to going back to selling bottled water, but
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
And to close this one out, I just like to bring in the voice of reason, Mr. Gene Simmons. Take it away, sir.
Someone else is in town, Roger Waters, Pink Floyd. You're obviously Jewish. He's been coming out with a lot of
Israeli.
And he's been coming out with a lot of very anti-Israel and what people perceive to be anti-Semitic comments.
I'm not sure that's the same thing.
Right. So what's your position about Roger Waters?
Well, first of all, he's a very talented guy. He's written some of the most wonderful music along with Floyd, many, many decades. And it's obviously held up, and he's got lots of fans. There is something to be said for keeping your political and other beliefs off the stage. His choice is to use the stage as a platform to further his point of view. There is a difference between a political statement about Israel and about anti-Semitism. By the way, anti-Semitism also involves Arabs. The definition of a Semite includes the Arab world. So I think
Gene, what was it again?
To use the stage as a platform to further his point of view. There is a difference between a political statement about Israel and about anti-Semitism. By the way, anti-Semitism also involves Arabs. The definition of a Semite includes the Arab world. So
there you go. Thank you, Gene. Thanks for putting the icing on that cake, my friend. So coming up, I have a great breakdown of the Chris Cuomo versus Dave Smith debate, which was fantastic. If you haven't watched it, definitely watch it. But first, we're going to talk about Tim Dillon on Tucker Carlson. It's like chocolate and peanut butter. Two great tastes that go well together, right? So let's start with them talking about cancel. Well, hold on. This is the LA real estate. They talk a little bit about the real estate market here because Tim is a real estate investor. And I'll just let him explain.
The United States, and if you've ever had a local landlord, which I have, you're much better off. I've been broke for years. I was a comedian. You're much better off sitting down with someone face to face like this and going, "I can get it Thursday," than you are dealing with BlackRock. So
they're not as compassionate?
They seem not to be. They seem not to be. So this idea that we demonized anybody that owned a 2-family house, and we said, look at this scumbag landlord, and they own a 3-family house where they live in one of the units, and the other 2 units are people that they rent to, and we said, look at these people, they're pieces. You know what happened? All the corporate landlords bought everything, own everything, and are raising the price of residential real estate for everybody that, you know, is trying to buy a house. So it's weird where we do, because we've got this.
I never hear anyone talk about that.
No one talks about it. No one cares. No one talks about the fact that most of the new constructions in London, at one point it was 60%. It might be more now or less, but at one point it was about 60% of all new constructions. I bet it's higher now, are being bought by foreign nationals with LLCs. They're not living there. It's doing in New York. I mean, they're doing it in all of these.
So this is interesting. I'm not advocating that the United States should not allow foreigners to buy land here or whatever. But in a country like Germany, and I have experience with this through my cousins who tried to buy property in Germany. They have a daughter that lives there, and her dad is a first-generation German who naturalized citizen of the United States now. It's basically impossible for them to buy property in Germany because they're not citizens who have resided there for a certain amount of time. Now, granted, Germany has a lot less land. You know, there's that, but I don't understand why that's not a thing here. At least there has to be some kind of a prerequisite. You can't just like roll in from China or Russia or whatever and just buy up the real estate here. That it's one of the failings of capitalism, and I'm not anti-capitalist, but I think when everything's about money, nothing has any value but money. So it's very easy for your standards to degrade quickly.
Cities, most of these buildings, you look at New York, Billionaires Row, there's 4 lights on, this huge skyscraper, who's there? No one's home. There's no school bus. No one's taking their kids to school. It's, you know, a guy that comes in and is laundering money through real estate in cities like New York and London and places that.
So that's why as the economy craters, and people are just.
Even if Trump's laundering money through real estate, which I'm sure he is, at least he's an American.
Or because of inflation.
Yeah.
Housing prices don't drop.
No,
rents don't drop.
That's right. It's being artificially propped up. And that's why these cities are really rich, wealthy city. You go, who has all this money? Who has all this money to buy these apartments? And then you go, oh, it's criminals from all over the world that are washing a lot of dirty money in real estate. And I'm sure maybe just rich people that aren't criminals, but a lot of them are guys. If you look it up, it'll be like a guy who poisoned a river in Zambia. And then and it's like, that's why all these real estate shows are fake. They're all not true. They're all these, with these attractive women, they walk around and they find a guy who's a basketball player or a guy who's like an actor. None of them are even buying the houses, by the way. I know the people that work on these real estate shows, you know, they really sell the houses to a lot of people that just come in speaking complete Mandarin. And I have a friend who's a real estate agent, and they come in, they speak complete Mandarin to a translator. He just points. He's in Beverly Hills and pointing. There you go. They stand outside, they look at the view. And they're the ones who are actually buying houses, or Russian nationals, or oligarchs, or people from the United Arab Emirates, or people from Brazilian mining magnates, or people from India. It's not really a lot of domestic buyers in LA. In New York, it's a ton of foreign nationals, you know? And that's why these real estate shows just aren't true. If they were true, it would be a real estate agent greeting someone at the door and going, this is a beautiful house. How did things go at The Hague? Are you okay? Everything was good at The Hague? Great. We saw that. Take a look at the veranda. They have that would be the.
Now, I don't know if you saw this, but Tim's making a really great point. There was recently a kind of popular viral video that went around to these graffiti guys in Los Angeles, graffiti artists, basically a group of graffiti artists, got together, and there's a bunch of, and I bring this up because Los Angeles is definitely suffering because of this practice. There are hundreds of empty buildings in downtown that are like, you know, investment properties or whatever that are empty. And recently these graffiti artists got together to highlight this, and they basically spray painted this building. And I'm going to show you just a quick picture of it, or the article real quick. I just pulled up, but you probably seen like the actual viral video that went around, but this is just to give you an idea. This is the NBC article about it. So LA's newest tourist attraction, abandoned high-rises covered in graffiti. Street art fans and the merely curious are stopping by to see handiwork of taggers who spray painted exteriors of 3 downtown buildings. And they were able to do this because there's no one living in these buildings. So it's very easy for them to climb up there. And few people walking around downtown could look away. It's interesting that crowds surrounded the popular Kobe Bryant statue, but the real draw for many was I saw it on TV and had to come check it out, said Ronald Velasquez. So it's interesting how the unfinished towers have become a destination for graffiti artists. Residents and workers appear divided on whether they consider So it's funny how at no point here so far, at least, do they mention the actual point of this act of protest. These guys actually did this. Oh, shit. I shared the wrong goddamn tab. No, I didn't. Never mind. I'm an idiot. The point of these graffiti artists doing this was to highlight the fact that, hey, there's a bunch of fucking giant empty buildings in LA, and nowhere in that MSNBC article, of course, or NBC article, do they touch on that. At least if they do, it's like way at the bottom. So that's typical. But anyway.
The real show, but it's not the real show, you know.
But what about the people?
So in this next clip, this is really funny. Tim talks about investing in Cum Rocket.
So you made money after years of being poor.
Yes.
So it's really about the NFT thing and kind of the crypto market. And it's almost like we're kind of like lumbering towards another 2008 type thing. But listen to
like
this.
You didn't put as much in the market as you did into real estate. Why?
Real estate to me is something I understand. I would probably get richer if I knew more about stocks, or if I knew, you know, I was caught up in that Bitcoin craziness where I still have a good amount of crypto. And I remember, we talked last night. I remember sitting at a table with like Jake Paul and a few of these guys, and Jake Paul's like, "Are you investing in Cum Rocket?" I said, "What is that?" And he's like, "Well, it's a coin. You know, it's a shit coin, but it was going up." He's like, "I made all this money," and I called my business manager like 2 a.m. in Miami, and I'm a sober guy, but I feel high because I'm calling my business manager at 2 a.m. Going, "Should I invest in Cum Rocket?" And he goes, "I think so. I think probably." So this is how nuts everyone got.
Did you invest in Cum Rocket?
I didn't. I was at the end of the day, I pulled out, and I'm like, nah, let's just stick with Bitcoin and Ethereum.
You pulled out of Cum Rocket.
I pulled out of Cum Rocket. I said, you know what? This is too volatile.
Yeah.
But
you went with the withdrawal method.
I went with the withdrawal method of Cum Rocket. I said,
I love that pun. Tucker caught it. I pulled out Cum Rocket.
I don't want it all over the place, but it was a crazy time. It was an insane time. NFTs, people were making millions.
That should have been their slogan, Cum Rocket. We don't want it all over the place.
Dollars. People were making all this money.
Here's how
Okay. So another thing that they kind of touched on in this is cancel culture and the Louis C.K. thing. And I think Tim has a lot of really good points about this. So check this out.
So you said a minute ago that the internet has decentralized power and disempowered all these institutions. And those are the institutions that...
Oh, man. I can't wait to show you these clips from the Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo debate, because that debate draws this contrast to an extreme between the internet, alternative media culture that's sprung up over the last 5 years and the mainstream legacy media.
Kind of decided who was successful and who wasn't, particularly in the entertainment business,
sure,
news, sports, even.
Yeah.
What does this mean for like their ability to crush people they don't like, to cancel people?
They'll have to find new ways to do it, and I think they're a little panicked. I think it hurts their ability to do it substantially, dramatically.
That way?
Yeah, I think dramatically.
You said you're friends with Louis C.K.
Yeah.
Who I don't know. I'm not defending Louis C.K., but I remember reading the details of that and thinking, okay, maybe unattractive.
Louis has been able to have a great career.
Is that a crime? Like, what was that?
No, not at all. And he's been able to have a phenomenal career.
But why did they do that to him?
Well, I mean, it was a moment in which, and I don't know the details of every single accusation in that piece, but I do know that it was a moment where people weren't thinking.
But even if they were all
wanted
true,
to punish,
even if everything written about the guy that I read was true, you'd be like, all right, that's embarrassing.
Well, that was a time when it wasn't enough.
I don't know, like, you know, I don't want to go too far down this wormhole, but when I actually read the New York Times article at the time that this happened. I was a New York Times subscriber. I read the actual article in their paper about Louis C.K. and his incident. And one thing that struck me at the time, and I posted this on Facebook and asked my female friends, who I have several of that are platonic friends. I said, hey, ladies, if a man invites you to a hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning, because this is how the article on Louis C.K. starts. It was 3 a.m. in Denver. All the bars were closed. Louis invited these two girls back to his hotel room. So my question was, hey, women, would you go to a man's hotel room with him at 3 a.m. if you kind of weren't expecting some sex shit to happen? And unanimously, all of my intelligent female friends were like, of course not. Like, if you're not going to someone's room to fuck, you don't go to their room at 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's the whole starting point of all of this anyway.
That someone admit to a mistake or it was about destroying people.
Yes.
It's about ending their lives.
But why?
I just think if people get caught up in these moral panics and they want to hurt people. And this is something deeply innate in our beings that have to be dealt with. We have to figure out, why we do this. But this is something that people like mobs and they like getting,
That's right.
Their pitchforks out. And I think, he's been able to have a phenomenal career. And he's, made movies. He's sold out Madison Square Garden. He's done all these things. His fans love him. And he's one of the greatest comedians that's ever lived. So you have that.
I really do believe that. I think Louis C.K. is one of the best comedians alive to have lived. If you haven't seen his 2017 special, it's a fucking masterpiece. His argument for abortion rights for women, I think, is like one of the best I've ever heard when you break it down piece by piece. But I don't want to spoil it.
But yeah, it was a time when people just wanted other people to be heard. It wasn't enough to say, I fucked up, no matter who it was or what they did. And I think now, people are looking at the full picture of a human being and going like, you know what? I think we're all over that. I'm hoping we're all over that. But there are forces out there that are going to have to adjust, So I don't know what they do.
So Louis C.K.
They may go back to killing people. That's what they did for a long. That's what they did for a long time. And then they just start destroying their reputations. But
well, Tim, I don't know if you've been paying attention to Boeing. Yes, I do. You have been paying attention to Boeing because you talk about it all the time. So they continue a little bit with Louis on this one.
This character assassination attempt, but thrived.
He thrived because his talent spoke for itself, and people know.
What is anyone keeping track of all the other guys who were destroyed?
I love that because his talent spoke for itself. It's so true. It's like it's like any artist. I think like Michael Jackson. I don't believe the claims against him at all. I think he was a fruity kind of dude, and it was easy for them to level those claims because he was living vicariously his own childhood through other kids. And, you see like Macaulay Culkin was on Rogan. I'm totally taking a sidebar, but Macaulay Culkin was on Rogan. And I remember this so clear, and I need to go dig this clip up, but Rogan goes, well, you slept in Michael Jackson's bedroom. And Macaulay Culkin goes, yeah, I slept in Michael Jackson's bedroom. But you have to understand, Michael Jackson's bedroom was 3 stories and had a fire pole. So it sounds a lot more salacious than it actually is, and that's...
I think a lot of them are doing great. I think a lot of them are doing fine because
the whole point of that side trail was I will fucking listen to Michael Jackson forever. I don't fucking care what anyone says about him. I fucking love his music.
I think, as we talked about, it's not the worst thing to have people turn on you because it makes you, it builds resilience.
Yes.
You know who your real friends are. You fall back on your talent. You lean on your talent. You lean on the things that you can do better than anyone else.
I fucking love Tim Dillon. Like he's just one of the wisest podcasters out right now. It's fucking brilliant.
And you try to make those even better. You have to be more effective in a way.
Yes.
You can't coast. The tide will not carry you. So you have to find ways to, create your own environment and create your own inertia to move the things you're doing forward. Because you won't be carried anymore by the mainstream. So you have to just go, and I think that's ultimately a good thing.
Well, Sue, it's bad that people kiss your ass. It's bad for your soul. You must deal with that.
No, I think I deal with people that lie to me all the time.
Yes.
So like that is a version of kissing your ass.
Of course.
People lie. So people make things, you know, you don't get a lot of good feedback all the time, but then there are people that I trust to give me real feedback. And they're not people that I'm usually paying. You start paying people, that can get complicated, but there are some people that I pay that I do trust to give me real feedback. But then there are also a lot of people that earn money off when I earn money that tell me everything's great all the time. And I go, I don't know if that was great. I know it was great. Like their job is to just keep you in a positive mind frame so that you keep earning money. Their job is not to bring any negative or real things to the forefront.
I mean, don't you think it's good for you to be attacked and confronted and belittled and humiliated?
I think
and
it's
brought to who you really are once again.
I think it's
Chris Rock has such a great bit about this where he's talking about how he says pressure makes diamonds. He's like, bullying is good for kids. He's like, you don't think that like guys like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg were bullies? Like Mark Zuckerberg was bullied so hard. He's like, Mark Zuckerberg made Facebook because they hit him in the face with a book.
It's certainly good if you're a creative person. And
yes.
You have to create and you have to shake yourself out of a comfort zone for sure. Yeah.
Do you get enough hate that it keeps you human?
I think so. I think I get enough hate.
You got enough today?
I think I get enough of people that don't like what I do or say, for sure. I think things are appropriately difficult, meaning like I have friction and that's good. I think that, you know, people, I'm not a person who, you know, is beloved with a lot of what I say, but my fans of people that like what I do like me, but then there are people that need some convincing. I think that's good. I don't mind it when I sit down with people and, you know, my manager and people like that will tell me, they go, yeah, they like you, but they don't know really who you are. I think you get a lot of similar stuff where people go, well, they have ideas about you that are not from you. They are just out there. So,
well, I agree. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being attacked for your actual crimes. There's nothing wrong with that. And I welcome it. It's being called names that actually aren't accurate.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
I once was talking to a New York Times reporter who was telling me what a racist I was.
Yeah.
And I said, first of all, I would tell you if I was a racist. I'm really not a racist. I'm actually a sexist.
Right.
And which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Sort of true. And I thought, that's a good line.
Yeah.
Didn't print it.
No, they won't print it.
If someone said that to me in an interview, I would print that.
Yeah.
So great point. Some friction is good, right? You know, I think I'm definitely an advocate for friction. I think a good challenge, that's the point of exercise, right? Like you have to break your body down to heal it stronger and stuff. It's like, that's just the way life works. Pressure makes diamonds. So this is really interesting because Tim Dillon talks about being approached by journalists to help them like make their work more funny so more people will read them. So this is a really good little tidbit as well.
I participated once in this thing where like there's a few journalists that like wanted to talk to a comedian because they were like, we want to start using more comedy in our pieces. And I was like, wait, what? And they were just these totally unfunny like people. It was just tough. I was like, guys, just write the fucking news. But they wanted like, what
did you tell them?
I just said, I don't know. I think people that are good at this stuff are good at it, and I can't tell you how to make.
Isn't it funny how they'll do anything possible to get more viewers or readers except just tell the truth about things?
Something funny, because they were basically saying like, we think that our reach will grow dramatically if we're funny. And I go, it might grow dramatically if you reported facts. That might.
Did they laugh?
No. They didn't. They were like, well.
And I already watched this clip, so I already had that. I can't take credit. Obviously, I was influenced by Tim's response with my cut in.
So that's all.
Are there any journalists you like or read or trust?
Sure. I mean, there's people that I read all the time.
Like who?
I read Andrew Sullivan a lot. I don't always agree with him, but I think he's worth a read.
Smart.
I've read Seymour Hersh
real quick
of the two northern provinces in Ukraine, which if you Google image them.
Okay.
There's
a part where
this is what I think. I think we have a deficit of purpose. I think the elites feel it. The people that have lots and lots of time to think about these things feel the deficit of purpose. I think if you're working 20 hours a day to feed your family, you don't have a deficit of purpose.
No, you don't.
But I think if you're lounging around in a DC townhouse trying to figure out what problems that you need to go out and desperately solve, you have a deficit of purpose. And I think this idea,
a deficit of purpose,
gives them the sense that now we are back in World War II. And there's good and there's evil, and this is the purpose. This is why we've all been on the planet, to confront the country with the most nuclear weapons of any other country over two regions of the two northern provinces in Ukraine, which if you Google image them, I mean, take it. I mean, truly, truly. And I'll give him part of this country too. There's a lot of this country.
Which parts?
A lot. There's parts of it that we don't need. I'll give him part. If Putin wants it, we'll give him parts of California.
North Jersey?
Yeah, we'll give him some parts of that. We'll give it. I think we should actually, let's really fuck him. Let's give him upstate New York. Let's give him a lot of Michigan. Let's give him stuff where he goes, hey, man, I'm good.
Could he fix Schenectady, do you think?
I don't know if anyone could. I was just in Schenectady, and I like the people there, but I don't know if anyone could. I actually said on stage, it would be nice if Putin invaded this.
What kind of response did you get?
They all laughed. They're great. They're great comedy.
Yeah, they
pieces.
are.
They get
because we'd send a bunch of money there, right?
But yeah, I mean, I think there's deficit of purpose. I think people like Ann Applebaum, I'm sure she's a lovely lady or whatever.
I don't think so.
She's a little vicious in the way she writes.
Loathsome, yeah.
Never met her, but it's very aggressive. It's very like, we got to go to Russia and we got to fight Putin. And I'm like,
is it weird some rich girl in DC is telling other people to fight wars?
That's weird to me. I go, is this a bad day thing? Are you? I would.
All right, one more piece from this, a little bit more.
Blinken went
into the Russia.
Wait, what? Performed rock.
What did he say?
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken went and.
Oh, you know what that means, right? A little Blinken for you.
Keep on bombing lots of people. Keep on bombing lots of people. Bombing lots of people.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken went and performed Rocket in the Free World. I don't know if you saw that.
I did see it, yeah.
I mean,
did that inspire confidence?
It's disturbing. It's crazy. If my child died in a war and then the Secretary of State of the country that's supposedly backing us showed up to play music, I would kind of be in the middle of the war, by the way. The war's not over. It would be a little disturbing to me. So it's just very strange. And then,
oh my God. That's so funny. I don't even know what to say. I don't have anything to say. Just that's hilarious.
Kamala Harris thing of like, well, this was a bigger country that invaded a smaller country. And that was her. I mean, Kamala Harris is like a Brentwood mom,
Yeah.
She's like a wine drunk kind of Brentwood mom. And so that's the way a mom would explain that. That's what like a Brentwood, California, Pacific Palisades, tuna tartare, Chardonnay mom explains that. She goes, it's a bigger country and they've invaded a smaller country. So that's the level of understanding they want us to have of any conflict.
But maybe that's not the truth, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, but imagine it's not. Everybody that I've spoken to, respect people like RFK and everything. There's a whole narrative that nobody's read about. Nobody understands.
The war was ongoing since 2014.
Yeah,
and just because we weren't paying attention doesn't.
Why did these Minsk Accords not get signed? Why? I mean, like,
What do you think it's really about? Actually,
I think it's about, I think, when people like Ann Applebaum write that Russia's a failed state and we need to westernize it. This is in the Atlantic.
It's a failed state.
She's written these things, and this is a common belief.
Maybe a state you don't like. It's the opposite of a failed state. It's a coherent state.
Yeah, you can not like it. It's been around for 1,000 years. It's not I remember when it was my job to give.
Pause right there. It's been around for 1,000 years. I have a friend who's Iranian, and he made the funniest point the other day, and I just thought it was so relevant to this. He goes, man, you Americans, your country's only 200 years old. You guys haven't even you just barely got it out of the garage. He's like, Persia, Iran is 1,000-year-old country. Russia Persia is a 2,000-year-old country, I think. Russia is 1,000-year-old. Like it's these countries have been around for, like, China, same thing. They're embedded cultures. The idea that we're just going to roll in and take them over, or it's fucking just massively insane. And why? What, like, we have anyway. Let's keep going. I'll shut up.
Stopping most Afghanistan. The Afghans.
Yes.
I remember that.
Oh, you do?
I remember when I was a senior year in high school and everybody goes, here's what we're doing. We're going to Afghanistan and Iraq. We're going to democratize the Middle East. This was the project.
Yeah.
Now these psychopaths want to democratize Russia. Back then they were Republicans. Now they're calling themselves Democrats. It doesn't seem to matter. They float between the two parties. Bill Kristol's on MSNBC now all the time. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember that. How did we leave Afghanistan 20 years later? Does it seem democratized? The Taliban's in power. We should have a 5-year moratorium on any conflicts after that. After 20
This is the crescendo. This is like the best metaphor for U.S. foreign policy.
years and the Taliban goes back in power, it should be like, it's like if you have a party
armed by us.
Yeah, if you have a party at your house and it burns down, your parents should go, you're done now. You're done. In our new house, you don't have any parties. You got to really establish that you've grown and learned from this. That was crazy to me. So when all these people make these arguments, I go, it doesn't really make sense that we would be doing this again.
Do you feel that changing, like to the extent that you're with Brentwood Wine Moms now?
Yeah.
Are they less enthusiastic about the brave Ukrainian people?
They don't care.
They don't care.
No one
exactly.
cares. No one really cares. It's just fun to pretend to care. No one cares. No one, unless you're from the Ukraine or you live in the Ukraine, no one cares at all. It is not even a real thing. If it comes up at a dinner, people go, terrible, terrible, horrible. Do they have the sticky toffee pudding? No, it's not real. It's not on our shore. It doesn't affect us. We don't fight. We just arm people. We send money. We don't care. It's the Israel-Gaza thing. It's not real. People get very upset, but none of these things affect us because we can watch them, but they're not impacting our daily lives. And so the government, now if the government said to us, now they're starting to do these really interesting things. They're going, we need the draft. We want to do that again. Germany's thinking about that. We're thinking Military Times ran an article where they're like selective service. We should reinstate the draft. How about you go fuck yourself? How's that sound?
That's right. People, go ahead and do that and then we can talk.
People are starting to
love that response.
Perk their ears up now. That changes everything. People start to go, wait a minute, what's going on? Because
now this is affecting me personally, but it is affecting us personally. And this is one of the things that Dave Smith lays out so fucking well in this debate he does with Chris Cuomo. So Tim Dillon, absolute genius, a lot of very deep, intelligent things to say in regards to current events. And I think I'm going to do something I don't do a lot, but I have 3 more segments and I've been on for over 2 hours now. So I'm going to go over to a Rumble exclusive and I'm just going to throw up for you guys. If you're not already on Rumble, jump over there, but it's just rumble.com/politics. And I'm just going to take a quick break and end the YouTube stream and head over there. So it's easy to find. And this Dave Smith, Chris Cuomo thing is great. There's so many. It's a long ass debate. So I have some bite-sized pieces of it for you to check out. And so I hope to see you over on the Rumble side and I'll be back in just a few minutes.